In late summer of 1942, somewhere between the passes of the Greater Caucasus and the upper valleys of the Baksan River, the 2nd Battalion of Gebirgsjäger Regiment 98 simply stopped existing, not destroyed, not overrun, not captured and marched into Soviet captivity. They vanished. A reinforced company of 187 men, mountain infantry veterans of Crete, veterans of the Izmir front, men who had already survived more than most humans ever ask of a body, marched into a narrow, unnamed side valley during the night of August 28th to 29th to secure a flanking position before the main thrust toward Tubes. Sunrise found the trail empty. Rucksacks, weapons, bread bags, even the company's 2-pack mules with their ammunition reserve. Gone. No blood. No expended cartridges. No sign of struggle. Only the tracks of hobnailed boots that, at a certain point marked on the old German 125000 map as Ho 2174 unnamed saddle, simply ended. The regimental war diary entry for August 30th is laconic. Company 5/98 seat 430-29.08. Wehrmacht. Kein Funkverbindung. Sucktrops ohne Ergebnis. Vorlaufig als Wehrmacht. Kampfunfähig durch Feindeinwirkung einzustufen. They were written off as combat loss. For almost 80 years, the story remained one more footnote among thousands of Caucasus footnotes. Until the summer of 2023, when a small Russian contract military installation, call sign Zelenaya Polyana 7, a modern high-altitude radio relay and drone control point, was built almost exactly on the same unnamed saddle where the boot prints had stopped in 1942. And then the new garrison began to report things that do not appear in any official incident report, things that make even hardened contract soldiers from Dagestan and Buryatia refuse night duty in certain barracks rooms after the 3rd week. Tonight, we are going to listen to 4 separate first-hand accounts from men who served at Zelenaya Polyana 7 between August 2023 and October 2024. All names changed. All ranks as they were at the time of recording. All speakers have either left federal service or are currently serving in other units far from the Caucasus. They tell the same basic story. Something that wears German mountain troop wool, carries a Carabiner 98K with the stock already cracked in half, and very much does not like being reminded that it is no longer 1942. Chapter 1: The room that smells of wet wool and cordite. My name is Ruslan A. In the summer of 2023, I was a senior sergeant and squad leader of the security platoon at a small high-altitude military installation called Zelenaya Polyana 7. The post sits on an unnamed saddle at 2,174 meters in the Greater Caucasus, overlooking the upper Baksan Valley. We were the first permanent garrison. Before us there had only been survey teams and construction crews. The complex was new. 6 prefabricated barracks modules, a diesel generator farm, a satellite dome, and a perimeter of razor wire backed by vibration sensors. Our mission was simple: keep the radio relays and drone control point operational year-round. The location had been chosen for perfect line of sight. Nobody mentioned that it was also the exact spot where, on the night of August 28th to 29th, 1942, the 5th Company of the 2nd Battalion, Gebirgsjäger Regiment 98 disappeared during a night march. 187 men, veterans of Crete and the Arctic front, plus 2-pack mules loaded with machine gun belts and mortar rounds. They marched into the saddle to secure a flanking position ahead of the main drive toward Tubes. At dawn the trail was empty. No blood, no brass, no bodies. Only hobnailed boot prints that led straight to this ridge and stopped cold. Module B4 was the easternmost barracks, closest to the old saddle. The smell started about 10 days after we moved in. Every morning between 4:20 and 4:40, the northeast corner of the room would fill with the unmistakable odor of wet wool, real sheep's wool, heavy with lanolin, the kind mountain troops wore in 1942, and underneath it, the sharp bite of old cordite, burned black powder from pre-war rifle cartridges. It was not mold. It was not diesel fumes or wet gear. We pulled floor panels, replaced HVAC filters, ran chemical sniffers. Nothing explained it. The smell arrived on schedule, stayed for 20 to 30 minutes, then vanished. Private First Class M from Kalmykia was the first to mention the dreams. Every 3rd or 4th night he would wake soaked in sweat, describing the same scene. He was lying in his bunk, but the room had changed. Wooden walls instead of metal, a small iron stove glowing in the corner, a carbide lantern hanging from a nail. At the table sat an Unteroffizier wearing the old mountain cap with the Edelweiss badge. The man was calmly cleaning a Carabiner 98K, working the bolt with slow, deliberate strokes. The sound echoed inside him a skull. Ka-chunk, ka-chunk. The NCO never raised his head until the very end of the dream. Then he looked straight at him with eyes that were completely white. No pupil, no iris, just blank white. In a quiet voice, thick with a Bavarian accent, he said in perfect Russian, "Vayam, you have occupied our barracks." M tried to laugh it off. Then he asked to change bunks. We let him. The smell followed him to the new bunk. By the end of the second week, 4 men in B4 were reporting the same odor. We started calling it the morning shift as a joke, but the jokes became quieter each day. No one volunteered for night duty in that module anymore. On the morning of September 4th, the vibration sensors on the eastern perimeter registered movement. Not a single intruder. Multiple sets of footsteps. Regular marching cadence. At least platoon strength. Coming straight from the saddle. We rolled out in full kit within 90 seconds. Thermals showed nothing. Night vision showed nothing. The sensors kept screaming. When we reached the wire, the movement had already stopped. Fresh boot prints were visible in the gravel inside the perimeter. Hobnail pattern. Size 43 or 44. Exactly matching Wehrmacht mountain troop issue from period photographs. The tracks continued 7 meters past the wire, then ended as if the men had stepped off the face of the earth. In the middle of the last clear print lay a single aluminum canteen cup, the type that clips to a mess kit. The green paint was deeply patinated, but the faint outline of the eagle was still visible on the bottom. Inside the cup was fresh cigarette ash. The smell of harsh wartime tobacco lingered when I brought it close to my face. We photographed it, bagged it, and sent it up the chain to the staff historian in Rostov. The reply came back 2 days later. Object consistent with Wehrmacht Gebirgsjäger personal equipment. 1940 to 1943 pattern. No further action required. That was the last official word on the canteen cup. That same night, the smell in B4 became overpowering. 3 men asked permission to sleep in the generator shed. Permission was denied. They ended up in the day room on folding cots. The smell stayed in the barracks until dawn. I wrote it up as an environmental anomaly in the duty log. But from that night on, I made sure my magazine was full and my weapon was within arm's reach before I turned out the light. Chapter 2: The Man Who Forgot His Bayonet. My name is D. Junior Sergeant, Diesel Mechanic. I was 26 that autumn, born in Buryatia. And I had always preferred night shifts. The mountains are quieter after midnight. The stars feel closer. The only sounds are the low rumble of the big 200 kilowatt Caterpillar generator and the occasional wind moving across the scree. On the night of September 11th, I was alone in the generator shed doing the scheduled oil change. The temperature was already down to -8. I had the main door cracked just enough to let the exhaust fumes escape. Around 2:10, I heard footsteps on the gravel outside. Heavy, deliberate, hobnailed boots. Not one man. A section, maybe more. The cadence was perfect. Left, right, like men who had drilled together for years. I assumed it was the night patrol coming back early. I wiped my hands on a rag and waited. The footsteps stopped directly in front of the door. The handle rattled. Once. Twice. 3 times. Hard enough to make the padlock chain clank against the steel frame. I had locked it from the inside. Standard procedure when working alone at night. Then a voice came through the metal, low and tired, speaking German. Aufmachen, verdammt nochmal. We're frieren hier draußen. Open the damn door. We're freezing out here. I know enough German from old Volkswagen manuals and a few phrases my grandfather picked up during his service. The accent was thick, old-fashioned, Bavarian mixed with something harder, like the men who came from the alpine villages around Garmisch. Nobody at the post spoke German like that. Not the officers, not the contract soldiers from Dagestan or Chechnya. Not even the translator we sometimes got on rotation. I stepped back from the door, hand on my PM pistol. I called out in Russian, Kato Tam, Identifizierweits. Silence for a long moment. Then the same voice, slower now, almost polite. Wir sind von der 5. Company. Wir sollen hier übernachten. Der Lieutenant hat gesagt, die Barack ist vorbereitet. We're from 5th Company. We're supposed to overnight here. The lieutenant said the barracks is prepared. My stomach turned over. I knew the history. Everyone at the post knew it by then. 5th Company, 2nd Battalion, Gebirgsjäger Regiment 98. The men who vanished on this very saddle in August 1942. 187 names on a roster that still exists in the archives. I also knew no patrol was scheduled to pass the generator shed that night. Before I could answer, something hit the outside wall. Not a fist. A full shoulder, like a man leaning his whole weight against the panel to test it. 3 solid thoughts. The steel flexed under the impact. Then silence again. I keyed the radio with shaking fingers. Command post, this is generator. Unknown contact at the shed door. Voice speaking German. Request immediate QRF. While I waited, I kept the pistol trained on the door. The handle rattled once more, then stopped. 7 minutes later, the quick reaction group arrived. 6 men, weapons up, thermal sweeping. The shed was empty. No heat signatures. No movement on the sensors. But the gravel was marked with fresh boot prints. Hobnail pattern, same as the ones we found near the wire a week earlier. The prints circled the entire building once, then walked straight toward the eastern perimeter, and disappeared exactly where the old trail ends. On the steel door, someone had scratched a single line with a very sharp point, probably a bayonet tip. The letters were in old Gothic script, 5/98. We photographed it. We dusted for prints. Nothing. The scratches were fresh. Metal shavings still curled on the ground beneath them. I finished my shift with the door wide open and the lights on full. When the QRF left, I asked for a transfer the next morning. I told the company commander I had family issues back home. He didn't argue. 3 weeks later, I was on a Mi-8 out of the valley. I still wake up some nights hearing that handle rattle. 3 times. Polite. Patient. Like a man who has been waiting 80 years for someone to let him in from the cold. I never want to know what would have happened if I had opened that door. Chapter 3, the roll call that woke the dad. My name is V. I was Senior Lieutenant and Deputy Company Commander for Rear Services at Zelenaya Polyana 7 during the autumn of 2023. I handle logistics, maintenance schedules, supply runs, and the endless paperwork that keeps a remote post functioning. I did not believe in ghosts. I still don't, not exactly. But I no longer laugh when someone mentions the old saddle. I was the one who signed the incident reports, the one who told the men it was just altitude sickness, poor sleep, collective suggestion. I believed my own explanations until the night of October 28th. That night, the entire post was on full combat alert. Several unidentified drones had been spotted moving up the valley earlier in the evening. We had raised the readiness level, doubled the perimeter patrols, and kept all personnel awake and armed. No one was sleeping. The barracks were lit, the radios were manned, and the generator farm was running at full load. At approximately 3:15, the public address system in the barracks came alive. The PA was an old Soviet-era tannoy setup that had been installed during construction and never used. We had disconnected the main feed months earlier because it kept picking up static from the mountain ionosphere. There was no power going to the speakers. I checked the wiring myself, yet the speakers crackled, then cleared, and a voice began to speak. It was a Feldwebel's voice, deep, calm, parade ground precise. The kind of voice that had spent years calling morning roll on frozen alpine parade squares. He spoke in German, very slowly, enunciating each name as if reading from a roster. Apple, Muller, Hans Schneider, Carl Fischer, Otto Lehmann-Paul. 14 names in total. I recognized every one of them the moment I heard the list begin. They were the first 14 names on the 1942 nominal roll of 5th Company, 2nd Battalion, Gebirgsjäger Regiment 98. The exact sequence preserved in the surviving Kriegstagebuch fragments held in the Bundesarchiv. I sprinted from the command post to the nearest breaker panel. The duty officer was already there, staring at the board. The main power to the barracks PA circuit was off. The breaker was in the down position. There should have been no current. I yanked the breaker anyway, then pulled the physical disconnect. The voice stopped mid-name, right before Muller, Hans-Georg, Gefreiter, the 15th name on the list. The moment the power cut, every light in Module B4 flared to full brightness, brighter than the emergency bulbs were ever designed to burn. Then the room plunged into complete darkness. Not a brownout. Total black. The backup batteries, which should have kicked in instantly, did nothing for 6 full seconds. I counted them by my own heartbeat. When the lights returned, every man in B4 was standing beside his bunk. Not one man was still lying down. Not one man remembered getting up. They stood at attention, eyes forward, as if someone had shouted "Aufstehen" at the top of his lungs. Their faces were pale, pupils dilated. Several were breathing hard, like they had just run 100 meters. I asked the nearest private what happened. He looked at me blankly and said, "I don't know, Comrade Lieutenant. I was asleep. Then I was standing here." We checked the entire module. No one had moved. No one had spoken. The roster had been read in German, but no one in the room spoke more than tourist-level German. Yet every man could repeat the names he had heard. There was no recording. The circuit had no microphone. The speakers had played sound that should not have been possible. I wrote it up as an electromagnetic anomaly, possible induction from the high-voltage lines or atmospheric discharge. I ordered the PA system physically removed the next day. The module was sealed pending plumbing and electrical inspection. That was the official reason. Unofficially, I told the company commander that I no longer wanted anyone sleeping in B4 until we could understand what was happening. He didn't argue. I still keep a copy of the 1942 roster on my desk at home. Not because I want to remember, because I need to remind myself that 14 names were read out loud in the middle of the night by a voice that had no right to exist, and that the 15th name, Muller, Hans-Georg, was never finished. I wonder sometimes what would have happened if the list had reached the end, if all 187 names had been called. Chapter 4 Polite Knocks in the Dark. My name is K. I was a corporal and signals specialist at Zelenaya Polyana 7. My job was to keep the Radio Shack running, HF links to headquarters, satellite backups, drone telemetry feeds. I worked mostly nights because the ionosphere settles after midnight and the signals come in cleaner. I was one of the last men still assigned to Module B4 before it was condemned. This happened on the night of November 3rd to 4th, 2023. I was alone on radio watch, sitting in the small corner booth that had been partitioned off for the comms gear. The rest of the module was dark. The other 6 men in my section were asleep. Lights out had been at 23. I had a red lens headlamp and the soft green glow of the radios to work by. At approximately 1:40 I heard footsteps in the central corridor. Slow. Heavy. Hobnailed boots on the metal decking. The sound was unmistakable. Crunch. Scrape. Crunch. Like someone walking carefully but not trying to hide. I thought one of the guys was heading to the latrine. I glanced toward the bunks. All 6 were occupied. No one was moving. The footsteps continued down the corridor and stopped directly outside my door. 3 polite knocks. Not loud. Not urgent. Just 3 firm raps. Like a visitor who doesn't want to wake the whole barracks. I froze. Then I called out, "Kato Tam?" No answer. 3 more knocks. Exactly the same rhythm. I stood up slowly, drew my Makarov from the holster, chambered around, and kept the safety on. I moved to the door and cracked it open just enough to see the corridor. It was empty. The emergency lights were on low, casting long shadows down the passageway. At the far end, near the emergency exit door, stood a figure. He wore the old mountain troop wind blouse, Feldgrau wool smock with the hood down, and the distinctive Edelweiss cap. A Carabiner 98K was slung over his right shoulder, barrel down. The stock was visibly broken, splintered about 20 centimeters above the pistol grip, as if it had been smashed against rock. He stood perfectly still, backlit by the exit sign, face in shadow. I could see the mouth moving, forming words I couldn't hear from that distance. I stepped into the corridor, pistol raised, and challenged him in a low voice. Identifiziert ili Ogan. He didn't flinch. Slowly, deliberately, he raised his left hand, palm toward me, the universal gesture to calm down. Then he spoke. The voice was wet, like someone speaking through a throat full of phlegm. But the Russian was clear. Nenato streliat. My prosto kodem domoi. No need to shoot. We just want to go home. The temperature in the corridor dropped sharply. I felt it in my lungs, in the sudden tightness of my uniform. My breath fogged in front of my face. The figure turned, took 2 steps toward the emergency exit door, and walked straight through it. Not opened it. Not forced it. Walked through the closed, dogged steel door as if it were not there. I stood there for a full second, unable to move. Then I ran back to the radio, keyed the emergency channel, and stayed on the line until the quick reaction force arrived. They checked the emergency exit from the outside. The door was still secured from the inside, dogs thrown, padlock intact. No sign of tampering. But on the metal grating immediately in front of the door were fresh hobnail boot prints. The prints led straight up to the threshold and ended. I gave my statement to the duty officer. I declined to return to night duty in B4. I requested reassignment to the new barracks block as soon as it was commissioned. They moved me out 3 days later. I still don't know what he meant by, "We just want to go home." Home for those men would have been Alpine villages in Bavaria, Tyrol, Salzburg, places that still exist. But the way he said it, the exhaustion in that wet voice, made it sound as though home was no longer a place they could reach, as though they had been walking for 81 years and still hadn't arrived. I don't know what they would have done if I had opened the door. I don't want to know. Chapter 5: The Canteen That Kept Returning. My name is A. Staff Sergeant, Armorer and Quartermaster Clerk at Zelenaya Polyana 7 from September 2023 until the relocation order came down in early 2024. I was the one who inventoried every piece of equipment, logged every item that came off the supply Miette, and made sure nothing walked off the post without a signature. I also handled the evidence locker, small steel cabinet bolted to the floor in the command post. That's where the aluminum canteen cup went after it was found inside the perimeter on September 4th. We treated it like any recovered foreign object. Photographed from 6 angles, measured, weighed, noted the patina and the faint eagle stamp on the bottom. Then I locked it in the locker myself. The key stayed on my dog tags. Only the company commander and I had access. Standard procedure for anything that might be historical or sensitive. By mid-November, Module B4 had been officially condemned. The main entrance was welded shut with a steel plate. All personal gear was removed, bunk stripped, power cut. The smell of wet wool and cordite disappeared the same day the weld cooled. The footsteps stopped. The polite knock stopped. The roll call stopped. We thought the problem was contained. We thought wrong. On the morning of December 12, 2023, I walked into the command tent for morning brief. In the exact center of the table, right where the duty officer sets his coffee, was the canteen cup. Same green paint, same patina, same eagle stamp, same faint cigarette ash inside, still warm to the touch, still smelling of harsh wartime tobacco. The locker had not been opened. The key had not left my neck. No one had entered the command post between 3 and 7 except the duty watch, who swore he had seen nothing. We burned it that afternoon. Thermite charge in a steel drum behind the generator farm. Nothing left but a puddle of aluminum slag and ash. I scattered the residue myself. The next morning, December 13th, another one sat in the same place. Identical. Fresh ash. We burned the second one, then the third, then the fourth. Each time it reappeared the following morning, always centered, always with fresh ash, always cold to the touch when we found it but still carrying the scent of tobacco that had been smoked decades earlier. After the fourth, we stopped counting. We stopped burning. We moved the command tent 200 meters west into the new site. We left the old cup locked in the evidence locker, chained to the floor, under 24-hour camera watch. The camera showed nothing. The cup was still there at 4. At 4:15 it was gone. At 7 it was back on the new command table. That was when the post commander requested full relocation of the entire station. The answer came back from higher headquarters. Budget constraints. Continue operations. Mitigate locally. We mitigated by moving the barracks complex 400 meters westward in January 2024. New modules, new generators, new perimeter. The old site was designated a technical exclusion zone, no entry without written authorization. The canteen cup stopped appearing after the move, or at least, we stopped finding them in the command tent. In October 2024, a drone operator running a routine night infrared sweep along the old saddle picked up a cluster of human-shaped heat signatures. Company strength, approximately 180 to 190 individual returns, standing motionless at the point where the boot prints always ended. No movement, no dispersal. They stood there for 47 minutes, perfectly still, then faded simultaneously, as if someone had extinguished 47 candles at once. No one was sent to investigate. The exclusion zone remains in effect. I still have the photographs of the first cup. I keep them on a private drive, not because I want to remember, but because I need proof that it happened, that we held something in our hands that should not have existed, that we destroyed it, and it came back anyway. I don't know why it kept returning. Maybe it was a reminder. Maybe it was a request. Maybe they just wanted someone to acknowledge that they had been there, that they had tried to spend the night, that they had never left. I don't know what they would do if we ever stopped acknowledging them. I don't want to find out. Chapter 6: The Wide-Eyed Honor Officer. My name is T. I am from Dagestan. Lance Corporal. Perimeter security rotation at the new site of WWII 7 starting February 2024. By then everyone knew the stories. The old saddle was off limits. Module B4 was welded shut. The canteen cups had stopped showing up after we moved everything 400 meters west. Most of us thought the problem had stayed behind with the old barracks. I was wrong. I drew the midnight to 4 watch on the eastern sector of the new perimeter. The fence line runs along a gentle rise, maybe 200 meters from the old saddle. We had upgraded the sensors, new Chinese vibration arrays, infrared floodlights, and motion-triggered spotlights. Nothing moved out there without us knowing. At least, that was the theory. At 2:45, the thermal camera on my sector station gave a single frame glitch. One bright white figure appeared in the center of the screen, exactly on the old saddle where the boot prints always ended. Single man. No heat trail behind him. No approach. Just there. I switched to the high zoom optical feed. The figure was unmistakable. Mountain troop smock, Edelweiss on the cap, carabiner slung low. He stood perfectly still, facing our direction. I zoomed in on the face. The features were pale, almost luminous in the moonlight. But the eyes were solid white. No pupils, no irises, just blank white, reflecting the infrared like polished glass. I keyed the radio. Command, Sector East. Single unknown at grid 2174 saddle. Visual on thermal and optical. Humanoid, military silhouette. Request immediate confirmation. Before the duty officer could answer, the figure began to move. Slow, deliberate steps straight toward the wire. No hesitation. No deviation. The spotlight snapped on automatically as he crossed the 100-meter line. The floodlights bathed him in white. He didn't flinch. He didn't raise a hand to shield his eyes. He kept walking. I challenged him over the loudspeaker. Standard procedure. Stoi. Identifizierweits. Rookie Verk. He stopped at the exact edge of the razor wire, about 5 meters from my position. The wind was dead calm. No sound except my own breathing inside the mask. He raised his head slowly. Those white eyes locked on me through the fence. Then he spoke. The voice was quiet, almost conversational, in clear Russian with the same old Bavarian accent I'd heard in the other stories. Nasha Kazern. WWII Obrodno. Our barracks. Give it back. The temperature dropped hard. My exhaled breath froze instantly on the inside of my goggles. I felt the cold in my bones, the way you do when you fall through ice into mountain water. I raised my AK-12, safety off, finger on the trigger. Back away from the wire. Identify yourself or I will fire. He didn't move. He only tilted his head slightly, like a man listening to something far away. Then he spoke again, softer. Prosto update. My used to lie. Just give it back. We are tired. After that he turned. He didn't walk away. He simply faded. 1 second he was there, solid under the floodlights. The next second the lights were shining on empty ground. No footsteps. No heat signature on the thermal. Gone. I stayed on station until relief arrived. The duty officer sent a drone sweep. Nothing. But the vibration sensors had recorded a single set of footfalls, hobnail pattern, from the saddle to the wire and back again. The tracks were there when daylight came. They ended exactly where he had stood. I finished my shift. Then I requested immediate rotation off the mountain. I told the commander I had a family emergency. He looked at me for a long moment, then signed the paperwork without asking questions. I have seen many things in the service. I have seen men break. I have seen fear in the eyes of soldiers who never flinched under fire. But I had never seen eyes like that, white, empty, and still somehow looking straight through you. He wasn't angry. He wasn't threatening. He was just asking, like a man who has been standing outside in the snow for 80 years, knocking politely, waiting for someone to let him in. I don't know what he would have done if we had opened the gate. I don't know what he would do if we ever gave the barracks back. I only know that I never want to see those white eyes again. And I know that somewhere on that saddle, he is still waiting. Chapter 7, The Endless March. My name is P. I was Staff Sergeant and Lead Drone Operator at WWII 7 from January 2024 until I rotated out for good in November of that year. By the time I arrived, the old site was a ghost town, Module B4 still welded shut like a tomb. The generator shed abandoned with that bayonet-scratched 5/98 on the door catching the morning frost. We had shifted everything 400 meters west to higher ground. New prefab barracks gleaming under fresh razor wire. Upgraded Orlan 10 drone pads, and a beefed-up sensor net that could spot a rabbit at 500 meters. The company commander told us the stories were bunk. Altitude hallucinations. Mass hysteria from bad rations. Focus on the mission, he said. Relay uptime 99% or heads roll. I flew the drones. Night reconnaissance mostly. Infrared sweeps along the Baksan Valley and the old passes. Côte du Tau, Donguzoran, where the 1st Jabergs Division had pushed during Operation Edelweiss in 42. Regiment 98 veterans. Those men. Crete Airborne. Narvik Arctic Hell. Then the Caucasus Grind. Their war diary fragments, pulled from Bundesarchiv scans we had in the briefing folder, mention high casualties from the passes. Entire platoons listed vermiss after probing the upper Baksan for a flank on tubes. No specifics on 5th Company, but the dates line up. Late August, saddle at 2,174 meters. Boot prints to nowhere. Soviet archives call it a blizzard ambush. Germans blamed fog and avalanches. Nobody found bodies. The new site felt safer at first. No wet wool smells in the bunks. No knocks at 140. Canteen cup stayed gone after the move. Lance Corporal T's Unteroffizier's sighting in February was chalked up to thermal bloom. Lens flare from the Elbrus ice cap reflecting moonlight. I believed it. Until March. On March 15, 2024, 3:45 Zulu, peak ionosphere window, I launched 2 Orlans for a routine IR patrol. The feed linked straight to the command tent monitors. At first, standard. Cold alpine meadows. Wolf packs scattering from the rotor wash. Distant drone lights from down valley posts. Then the old saddle lit up. Not one figure. Not a patrol. A full company formation. Company column of route. Point element. 3 platoons in echelon. Rear security with the 2-pack mules inferred from the heat blobs of the loads. Approximately 187 discrete signatures. Matching the 42 roster strength. Hobnail cadence implied by the synchronized footfall vibrations pinging the seismic net. They marched from the saddle. Exact grid where the prints always cut off. Straight down the trail toward our new perimeter. No dispersion. No chatter on HF intercept. Thermals showed wool greatcoats, slung carabiners. Edelweiss caps as faint head blooms. I sounded the alert. Command, Drone 1. Multiple contacts. East sector. IR positive. Company minus. Marching inbound from exclusion zone. QRF scrambled. Full platoon, AK-12s. PKMs hot. Night vision Gen 3. Floods snapped on at 200 meters. The formation halted precisely outside the wire, like a waiting gate inspection. No advance. No aggression. Just standing, heat signature steady at -5 core temp. Human basal. But no wind chill drop. Then the PA crackled. Not our system. The old Tannoy ghost, wired through the new grid somehow. That Feldwebel voice again. Parade ground iron. Full roll call this time. 187 names. Alphabetical by surname. From the exact 1942 roster. Muller, Hans-Georg Gefreiter. Schneider, Karl, Oberjäger. Nordhoff, Lieutenant. Kommandierend. Pauses between each, as if waiting for higher. Responses that never came. The QRF hit the wire in 6 minutes. Thermals flatlined. Optical empty. But the sensors logged it. Synchronized steps encircling the new B4 module. Hobnails grinding fresh prints in the gravel. The trail looped the building once. Shoulder thuds implied on the walls. 3 per side. Then faded at the east door threshold. No entry. No breach. We reviewed the drone footage frame by frame. Perfect formation. No blur. No artifacts. IR sent technicians from Rostov. They blamed electromagnetic interference from solar flares. Rewired the PA. Issued stand down. It happened twice more. August 28th anniversary. October 29th, roll call echo. Each time. The column reformed on IR. Marched to the wire. Called names till cut off. Last flight, October 15, 2024. Pre-rotation. Same cluster, but now at the new saddle contour, 50 meters upslope. They weren't following the move. They were adapting. The commander petitioned Stavropol Command for full evacuation. Unexplained phenomena compromising operational readiness. Denied. Budget. Man up. Volunteers dried up. Night shifts doubled pay. Still short. No solo pulls in the new B4. Dagestanis and Buryats whispering about Nemci Pokotniki, the marching Germans. I left with my hard drive. Raw IR stacks, seismic logs, roster overlays. Not for proof, for warning. They're not hostile. No shots fired in 83 years. No grabs, no drains. Just marching. Patient. Expectant. Still waiting for troops orders that never came. Still trying to billet down from the cold. Still calling roll, hoping for Ilda. We planted Edelweiss at the old saddle last week. Me and Russell and A. Before my helo. Local flowers. No import. Haven't heard the wool smell since. Or the Unteroffizier. But at 4:20, when the drone's auto-patrol cordite lingers on the feed, and the seismic twitches. Left. Right. Left. What if they march inside next time? What if they finish the roll call? What if home isn't Bavaria anymore? But this ridge they've held since 42. I don't fly Caucasus routes anymore. But I hear them some nights. Caught chunk of bolts. Cadence on gravel.